Welcome. It's 2:01 p.m. I'm Brian Levin, Chair of the California Commission on the State of Hate, and we'll start with our call to order. Welcome to the third meeting of the year of the California Commission on the State of Hate. Closed captioning is available for this meeting. The closed captions can be displayed in English or another language, which will allow you to view an automated live transcript of the meeting in another language. And Alec, if we could just go to the closed caption slide. To display the closed captions on your screen, please do the following. Click the button labeled closed captions at the bottom of your Zoom window. Select the box at the bottom of the window labeled Enable Translation. When you see you've enabled translation at the top, select English as the speaking language and select your preferred language in the second menu. Click Save, then automated captions in your selected language should start appearing at the bottom of the Zoom window. We will now send instructions in Spanish in the chat. And now we'll get to item B, which is the establishment of a quorum. And Deputy Director Watts will do the roll call.
Chair Levin.
Here, present.
Vice Chair Damsky.
Present, thank you.
Commissioner Che.
Present.
Commissioner Cuellar. Commissioner Filer.
Present.
Commissioner Roybal. Commissioner Salcedo.
Present.
Commissioner Suthers.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Fantastic, and thank you all. Next, we'll go to item C, which is the review of the agenda, which we have our welcome and call to order. We had our establishment of a quorum. We're doing the review of the agenda. Next, we'll have approval of the minutes and then a wonderful informational presentation by Dr. Ed Dunbar of UCLA. After that, we'll have discussion and action regarding the annual report. The Civil Rights Department will then have a discussion on the report and specifically CHIS. And after that, Vice Chair Damsky will lead off our chair, vice chair, and subcommittee updates. Next, we'll have a remembrance of Pope Francis. After that, a discussion of civil rights and civil liberties, followed by a discussion of outreach and publicity, commission member announcements, and then finally, two items. One, future agenda items, and we are going to adjourn in memory of Linda Becerra Moran, and Commissioner Salcedo will say a few words to honor her memory. You may review the agenda by visiting the Commission's website and clicking on the button labeled Meetings and Agenda. We'll send that link to the agenda in the chat. Next, if Alec, if you could put up the public comment slide. I'd like to move on to the reviewing the process for public comment. If you are joining us on Zoom and you would like to make a public comment, please use the raised hand feature to join the public comment queue. If you are joining us by phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and then *6 to unmute. You may also submit a written public comment by email at csh@calcivilrights.ca.gov. One more time, csh@calcivilrights.ca.gov. If you submit a written comment that pertains to an agenda item, we will read it out loud or summarize it when the public comment portion of that agenda item is open and before any vote. If the comment is not about a specific agenda item, we will read it aloud or summarize it during the agenda item titled public comment on items not on the agenda. And Monica, if you could put that into the chat. For anyone joining us in the room in Sacramento, please raise your hand for a verbal comment and we will unmute the room. You may also submit a written comment by writing your comment on a piece of paper and handing it to Shayna Hart, our staff member in the room there today. In the interest of time, we will limit verbal public comments to 2 minutes per person. We're now going to go on to commission discussion. Monica, do any commissioners have their hands raised?
No hands raised by commissioners.
Thank you. Do we have public comment on Zoom or in the room, Monica?
No public comment.
Kevin, do we have any emailed public comment?
No email public comment.
All right. Thank you all. Our next item will be approval of the minutes from March 26, 2025. We will now move on to approval of those minutes from the March Commission meeting, which are attachment A. We will post the link in the chat to download attachment A from the Commission's website.
It looks like we have 2 hands raised from the public.
I'm sorry, with regard to the previous agenda item or with regard to the minutes?
I believe they raised their hand before we got to the minutes.
Okay, then we will go to public comment with respect to the last agenda item. Please.
Jeff?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Jeff Ellsworth. I guess I misread the agenda. I thought the public comment was at the end, but I can give it now if that's helpful.
It depends on what you're commenting on.
It's just general public comment. It's not on one of the agenda items.
Then Alec, I believe that goes towards the end of our meeting today, right?
That's correct. Thank you, Jeff Ellsworth. If you want to reserve your public comment for public comment on items not on the agenda, that sounds like a good place to give that comment.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarification. I'll jump back on then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment from the previous agenda item, not the approval of the minutes?
There was a hand raised by Roz and Michael.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Roz Shorenstein. I'm actually following up on a virtual comment that I made summer of 2024. So would it be okay for me to talk now because I can't stay till the end of the meeting anyway?
Would you be able to perhaps put it in written form and we'll make that announcement of yours during the end of the meeting when
Yeah,
it's
I already emailed it to Andrea Beth. So if that'll, but I did it in advance. So if she's able to do that, then that would be fine.
I received a very, very long email with many references in it. I'm not quite exactly sure which you would want to.
Oh, okay. It was just my personal statement, which I can send you again. Just not the other reference. The references were at the end, but it was like a 1.25 page double space letter before the references.
Okay, that would be too long for public comments anyway,
Oh,
but you
okay.
can send it and we can provide it in our written public comments.
Okay, yeah, I already sent it to you. Should I send it again?
Please do.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
all right. Are there any other public comments from the previous agenda item, not approval of the minutes?
No other public comment.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. So now we'll go to commission discussion with regard to the approval of the minutes. Monica, do you have any commissioners that have their hands raised?
No commission comments.
All right. Do we have any public comment with respect to the approval of the minutes? Either in Zoom or in the room, Monica?
No public comment.
And Kevin, do we have any emailed public comment?
There are no public comments via email.
All right. I will then move on to commissioner discussion on the minutes, as well as if anyone wants to make a motion with respect to it.
I can make the motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Do we have a
I'll-
second?
I
I would second that. Thank you.
Alec, if you'd be, thank you both commissioners. Alec, if we could get to a roll call vote.
Absolutely. Chair Levin,
Aye.
Chair Dembski, or Vice
Yes,
Chair Dembski, excuse me.
yes, thank you.
Commissioner Che,
Aye.
Commissioner Quaylar, Commissioner Feiler,
Aye.
Commissioner Royball, Commissioner Salcedo,
Aye.
Commissioner Suthers.
Aye.
I counted 6 ayes, so the minutes are approved.
Fantastic. If we could now go to Roman numeral 3 on our agenda item, something I'm very excited about, our informational presentation by Dr. Ed Dunbar on hate crime victim assessment and treatment, pragmatics and problems. This is a real joy for me. Dr. Edward Dunbar is a clinical professor in the Department of Psychology at UCLA and a licensed psychologist. But before I get into his wonderful background, we're just going to do some business, and that is we are very fortunate to have Dr. Dunbar here today, but I do want to note that the information presented today does not necessarily reflect the views of the Commission or the California Civil Rights Department. With that being said, let me tell you a little bit about our friend. His mental health consultation activities have been in the areas of workplace harassment, crime victimization, psychological trauma, and violence risk assessment. He has also served as an assessment psychologist for fitness for duty of environmental disaster and NRC personnel, law enforcement, and government security personnel. Dr. Dunbar has consulted with the LAPD, the Los Angeles Unified School District, the Los Angeles Gay and Lesbian Center in the areas of hate crime offender evaluation and violence prevention in schools. His publications have been in the areas of the clinical evaluation of racism, victimology, and intergroup relations. He has been involved in the analysis of hate crime activity with the LAPD and conducted cross-cultural studies of attitudes concerning human rights laws. He has edited a book series on hate crime and published on the 2016 presidential elections called 2016 U.S. Presidential Election, Hate Unleashed. He's the editor of Indoctrination to Hate, put out by Prager in 2022. And interestingly, the forthcoming Despot on the Couch, Psychological Autopsy of Authoritarian Leaders. I've noticed, though, that we left out that you were also given a very special recognition about 20 some odd years ago by the American Psychological Association, but we'll skip on to that so that we can enjoy this discussion. I want to just say to both the Civil Rights Department staff, all the commissioners, we will have time for questions on this marvelous scholar at the conclusion of his presentation. So without further ado, Dr. Dunbar.
Thank you so much, Brian. And I suppose of all those things that I just heard about, the thing I'd like to emphasize and just what we'll talk to and what I will kind of talk about that I know is that I work as a practicing psychologist. So while I do research on these issues, I also have treated hate crime victims. I've had students who've been gay bashed. I have seen actually 2 cases where there was a false positive, where an individual had suggested they were a victim of hate and were not. So, you know, I've done that, as well as I've also taught courses at UCLA and elsewhere on the topic of hate. So I kind of come at this from more the living with that as a day-to-day rather than just as a theoretical. You know, I see it in the people I work with, and that sort of informs a lot of my real thinking. Now, got a few points to make, just a few, and I'll try not to say things that you probably already clearly know. I may touch on them, but I'll sort of tell you what I think are some things to give consideration to. So first of all, with hate crime victims, is we've now in this country had, the statutes going back federally to the early 1990s. And it's something that I know we all talk about a lot, is the idea of the underreportage issue of hate crimes. And I would say, what I've seen more practically are situations where even in the courtroom, approaching going in for prosecution, people start to question and will back out, sometimes well down the road as far as being ready for some kind of justice to be sought. So we see that dilemma across the whole spectrum of things, as well as maybe their attitudes about asking for help to begin with. But what I'd like to emphasize are maybe one or two things that I've seen in the work I've done, one of which is that we really see some very deep sort of societal and cultural differences that I could characterize very simply as being, when you look nationally at the reportage of hate crimes, it really mimics extremely well the division of the states during the Civil War. And I think, again, probably some of you know that very, very well, that we see dramatic differences in the base rate of reportage of hate crimes based upon what was going on, 150 years ago. I'd add to that, when I've looked at the idea of reportage of hate crimes over the first 20 years of the federal statutes, that the singularly best predictor of lower reportage was the relationship of a higher number of identified Black lynching activity for a 100-year period, as documented by the Tuskegee Institute. So we look at some of these things, and I have to say that there's sort of a deep cultural basis that goes well behind just the incident that happened today. So underreportage may be due to some things which are very deep in our communities and our culture. I would add to that, though, something which is a little bit maybe non-commonsensical, and that is in work I've done, particularly on gay, lesbian, transgender hate crimes, has been that as the offenses are more severe, more physically violent, there's actually an increase in the non-reportage. So what we would think commonsensically, the average person would say the opposite would be the case. But the data we've gotten and things that I have published would sort of suggest to the contrary. A second thing that is very important is the idea of the intersectional risk. As people are of more discernible population groups that we would characterize as minority, they are again more likely to not report. So people who are of color and are sexual minorities are less likely to report substantially than compared to people who are Anglo-white and gay, lesbian and reported. So we see some real big differences there. Now, as a practitioner and as somebody who has had to work with people to consider reporting hate crimes, I'm going to use a term out of community psychology, which is help seeking. And that is to say, how do people think about hate crimes? And I would emphasize for our state, for California particularly, where we have a lot of people who are not born and raised in the United States, the very notion of a hate crime statute is not something to take for granted. And I know probably for some of the commissioners, this is an issue they've grappled with on how to educate and inform people. I would just underscore the critical importance of that. And I've had students I've worked with who've been the victims of hate violence, and they've said, I didn't even know there was such a law. So we look at help seeking as something that requires like an educational component for the stakeholders, the community groups that might support or inform the victim. We cannot assume people know this just because they've lived here for 20 years or 30 years. Another thing that I would say that is important to this is also that there is a healthy paranoia, as we would say in community psychology, of people who come from communities where they have felt not welcomed by law enforcement or safe in the presence of law enforcement. And I think I saw this most discernibly when I years ago was doing work on hate crimes in the Czech Republic. And I suggested, why don't we involve the law enforcement? And the comment back from the stakeholders there was, they're the people that are supporting the perpetration of violence against the Romas and Indo-Chinese population. So we have to admit that there are times that law enforcement simply is on the wrong side of this, or at least are perceived as being on the wrong side of this. Something that I also would just emphasize that we are facing as well is that there's no good corollary between the severity of the crime and the likelihood of reportage. So again, we may see people more likely to report things which are non-violent in their nature or that are singular in their occurrence versus things which are reoccurring. And I think that again gets to some of the challenges we're facing and how to create a community and support, which I know is what the commission is here to do. So as I would put it, that the penal code is not a great correlate of the likelihood of people seeking services. Now, another thing I think that's very important, I'm speaking really as a mental health practitioner on this, is it's very important for individuals running organizations doing victim services to consider how to find true, competent experts to treat and work with this topic. There is no gold standard to speak of as far as mental health service delivery. And a dear friend of mine who used to do a lot of prosecution, and she would say to me, well, as long as we get them to some shrink, and I would say, you know, some people really are having a background and expertise in this, and some people simply don't at all. And I think that there's a need when we look at least the urban centers to say, how do we identify people that really have a competency and a commitment to this issue? Because there are many people that simply don't have the skills and knowledge, nor the motivation necessarily to address this very troubling and chronic problem. You know, a term I would use here, and it comes from when I used to work in the Hawaii State Senate, we would say out there as a joke, hello, I'm from the government and I want to help you, you know. I think we're facing a really dramatic challenge right now, and that is very simply with the presence of ICE and deportation, that we're really putting a great burden upon ethical and responsible law enforcement personnel to know how to differentiate their intentions to intervene and respond to hate violence from people that simply walk in and try and take our children and our neighbors away. So I think we're facing a really big challenge. I would not suggest I have a solution to that, except I think it has to be put as a front and center issue. And then final point, I think that this is relevant to kind of consider at all times. We've talked for many years, many decades about the idea of post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a disabling and sometimes life-changing event. My research would suggest something kind of important, and that is that a hate incident can be just as disabling psychologically as a literal hate crime. What I mean by that is chronic taunting, harassment, things which might be considered First Amendment rights in our society can have dramatic impact upon individuals in terms of their mental health, in terms of also their help seeking and their sense of security and safety. And again, I think where we look, and I think, again, the commissioners are very sophisticated in this front, we understand that for some people, a hate crime may happen after years of harassment and threats and forms of exclusion. And I would just make the point that, again, in doing research, particularly on campuses in this country, when you talk about nonviolent hate incidents, people feel that they did best by facing the offender and confronting them. I don't know that I would make that assumption if I was talking about a gay bashing situation or the idea of, you know, community violence. But we have to develop the skills for people to know how to respond to the forms of harassment that we're seeing and continuing to see in our society. So those are the things I wanted to touch base on a little bit today, and I provided to the commission a fairly detailed enumeration of sort of treatment goals and strategies for people doing mental health practice. And, you know, Brian just asked that that be made available to people as they have an interest. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dunbar. I'd like to have a commission discussion if any commissioners have their hands raised.
Oh, and Brian, here's the plug, and it's a free one.
Yes, do the plug.
A website called voicesagainst-hate.com, and myself and some of my colleagues, we simply are interviewing people talking about their area of work or their experiences with hate. And so there's just a sort of compendium of things from people literally around the planet that are talking about this issue.
Oh, fantastic.
Thank you.
Now we go to the commission for commission discussion. Any commissioners want to query our good doctor?
Commissioner Suthers?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Hi.
Excellent. Dr. Dunbar, thank you for your work. In the interest of full disclosure, I'm president of the LA Police Commission, so I am familiar with you. I have a question for you as it relates to hate incidents and the First Amendment. So, as you know, in public meetings, particularly in the last several years, it's become quite aggressive. I'm being very diplomatic right now. Have you ever seen where hate incidents that happen in that forum have risen to the level of using the California Penal Code section 646.9, which you know what that is, of course, when you willfully and maliciously repeat targeting the same individual at a public meeting. Have you ever seen that used effectively against someone who's been in that forum and targeted a commissioner or a public official in a meeting under the guise of the First Amendment?
I would say probably not at a public meeting, but you immediately make me think of some of the work I've been involved with others on terms of harassment of educators and school personnel, and that has, again, a very high frequency of occurrence when you ask the students about it. And again, I think, where this gets intriguing is to say some individuals really who are the perpetrators kind of push the limits, and they're saying, how far can I go? What will I get away with? And I personally feel that's a challenge of the respective institution to say, do we have a clear line of saying there's something called opinion and then something called harassment? And I've worked with faculty who have been the victims of this kind of harassment. Again, educators, and it's disabling. I've known people that have left their schools where they were tenured to say, this is just not something I'm going to continue to put up with. In a public arena, I think, it's so fascinating because having done work with the EU Commission on Hate Crimes, they would say, well, we treat that as an incitement to violence. Now, it's not a First Amendment right. And there's somebody I could very well recommend on this, Vera Petschkel, who works with the UN, and she's written a whole book on this topic. But it really gets at the idea that it's not necessarily just fiery individuals who are impulse disturbed. Some of these people are very familiar with their opportunities to harass, and they refine that almost to an art form. And that leaves us then sometimes being the ones who will then be aggressive and will say, see, now you're the one who's just escalated.
Yeah, unfortunately, I meet with them every Tuesday, and they understand the threshold being a threat, and they don't make a threat. But every Tuesday, they target the same individuals with the same extremely offensive comments and racial epithets. And because it is in a public forum and it is free speech, it is allowable.
Exactly. And what's remarkable in our culture, and maybe that's the right standard. You do the same thing in Switzerland, they throw you in jail. And we think of, cultures that we would consider to be kind of interchangeable with us. And I think that's a very, challenging issue. I mean, I also think that this is something at least universities have a hard time with, which is if we have this happening, do we teach about this? Do we educate? Do we focus upon it? Or do we feel like, I don't want this to be part of what our campus climate is known for while it's still happening?
Well, again, thank you for your work.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes.
Excellent question, and we're going to move on to some other folks. Just want to note, 1969, United States Supreme Court, Watts versus United States. When a inductee was at a protest, he said, the first person I'm going to get into my rifle sights is LBJ. And the Supreme Court ruled that it was a crude political statement, but the law protecting the president from threats was constitutional. So anyway, let me get to Commissioner Salcedo, who has had her hand up, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair Levine. And also, thank you so much, Dr. Dunbar, for your presentation. I guess I want to say a couple of things. The one is a question, and the other one is sort of, I guess, a comment about what just brought up in terms of authority and the inability for people to be able to express themselves to authority. And I think that is one of, I guess, the good things that we have in our country, although it's sort of like a double what do you call it? A sword with a double whatever. I don't even know how to say it, but you know what I'm trying to say.
You do, I think.
And yeah, it's a double sword. I don't know. Filo con dos, you know, cuchillo con dos filos. And so, I mean, I think it's important that we obviously continue to have that because that is a right. And it's also, you know, something that we have, right, to really say what we have to say, even if it's authority, right? But the question that I have is, you mentioned in your presentation the hate crimes committed to gay and trans people, how more, I guess, atrocious they are. I don't think that was your exact words, but
Fair to say, yeah.
Yes. And so, I mean, this is obviously something that continues to happen, right? And I guess I would like to hear from you to think, what are the possibilities? How do we, yeah, I said an education thing. Do we have to educate the public? Like, what is it that we need to do to ensure that, particularly people of trans experience, and in this case, trans women, who continue to be the targets, how can we diminish that? I appreciate any type of insights that you can share with us.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating to see that how the trans rights issue has been such a dog whistle, such a redirection of a lot of things going on right now in our society broadly. One of the things I've done on occasion in the past is I've consulted with emergency room teams around just the psychological stress of being there. And I could well envision it would be useful to have some clear linkage of saying people that are being brought in where there may be a trans status, or where they're simply, as we used to use the expression, gender bending, and are being targeted, to be sure that the medical personnel are able to respond at that point appropriately and know that there are such resources available. I think don't think that's done enough. And I think this is a fascinating issue. And if I could, even for about 45 seconds here, kind of digress. I spent a fair amount of time in Buenos Aires, and I worked with the law school down there. I presented in hate crimes in Buenos Aires, and they kind of look at me like, we don't exactly know what that is. And I was literally a few weeks ago talking to some prosecutors. I said, well, it's interesting. What do you have here in the way of LGBT crimes? And they said, well, we had one case that some people thought was about that and others didn't. I said, well, okay, it's interesting. So Argentina, you're not having so much of that going on, but you go across into Brazil, and there is a very, very well documented, series of homicides against trans people. And there's a very clear presence. And I said, is this really a national boundary issue? Is it a cultural issue? How do we discern in one, adjacent country, you're seeing this in another, you're not? So, where again are we looking at something that's like deeper culture that has to be addressed? And I think, for me as an educator, I want to teach about that, and I want to have exposés about that. And I do think that the better part of the answer to your really good question is, what are we saying in our media to give a realistic understanding of diversity of sexual opinion, lifestyle, and value? And I think if we step back from that, not only is it then a failure to support people that are simply being themselves, but I have worked homicide cases in the courtroom where people will say, my government told me it was all right to kill an Asian. And when I hear that, and I'm thinking, and I'm talking with the Trump administration, when I think that we give permission to people to be aggressive, I think that's where we're really losing the ballgame. I think if we are messaging people societally and in our media that somehow that there are people that are less valuable, which again, I go back to the whole issue of deportation, we are really on a very dangerous, if you want to say, slippery slope. So practically, I'm looking at how do we intervene with people where there are victims. I think is an attitude change. It's about showing the legitimacy of people to be different in a popular media context is hugely important. And then I think we have to hold our stakeholders, our personnel, to a higher standard. I mean, literally just in this last week, we saw Health and Human Services coming out with basically language to say that conversion therapy should be given some legitimacy. People like myself and Brian have written about this and argued this for 30 years and said, you know, for me as a mental health practitioner, conversion therapy doesn't work. And homosexual panic as a defense isn't legitimate. I mean, there's a psychological science that sometimes could be brought to bear on this. So I think there's a bigger message that has to be sustained. Maybe California, we're simply going to do a lot better job of it than our federal government. And I think we have to look at where those victims first show up. And yeah, that does include the ER.
Yeah, and if I can just really quick say
Please.
that obviously we know that institutional violence translates into interpersonal violence, right? And particularly for trans people and gender expansive and intersex individuals, right? The fact that we are political targets at the moment, right, like fuels the violence that we experience. And as you said, it sort of like gives people this entitlement that it's okay to attack us and that it's okay to kill us. And so we definitely need to do better into supporting members of our communities to ensure that all of our communities are safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Salcedo. Commissioner Che, your turn, but I would like to thank you for a couple of things. One, this excellent report that you're going to talk about later, but also your consistent support for human and civil rights. Floor is yours, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair Levin. Thank you so much, Dr. Dunbar. And I want to really appreciate your recognition as a mental health practitioner that hate incidents can be just as traumatic as what we would define as a crime, and including an environment where there's persistent messaging by those in influence. And it does seem like you have a lot of experience working internationally. And I was wondering if you have experience around public health approaches, because if we are really talking about cultural change and how we signal the innate value of every human being, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
That's a really excellent question. And I think, again, probably the commission, you have appreciation of this. Are we talking about a problem that is exclusively a legal problem? And again, the moment we talk about this as a public health issue, we've addressed something else that's terribly important. And that is to say, if we discourage people from seeing that there are medical resources, legal resources, social resources, those people will suffer. And, you know, we also have to look that there are differences of culture about then how people approach institutions. And there's a real need for a public health education perspective on how and what do we do to get services provided to people where there's forms of discrimination and harassment with or without the code. I think is important. I've seen some efforts in the Scandinavian countries where they've made those kinds of inroads and efforts. And I will never forget the wonderful gentleman, Chester Pierce, who was like the father of Black psychiatry. And Pierce wrote very compellingly to say, you need to think of racism as like a toxic spill in your community. And given I have a background in environmental disaster work, I thought this is so relevant. And, you know, we can talk about the idea of how does that compromise communities? How does that affect both a business community as well as an educational and a social community? I think those are very important issues. And again, you know, like we've said about diversity for years, the idea of looking at difference and conflict has to be wrapped into our educational programs on a very systemic level. And so we can talk with, in one case, maybe about how do you get early, something I'm dealing with right now. How do we get early care for identification of Alzheimer's in the Asian Pacific community? How do you do that with people that come from countries where they didn't have maybe that infrastructure? It's not that different of a question than saying, do you know you have rights if you're being harassed by your neighbor? Do you know if there's hate speech being directed at you? Similarly, this is, again, there needs to be a process, and it needs to be very, I think, integral to any kind of dynamic of measuring public health. And I think when we do good public health work, we do pay attention to those things as being critical. So there's an educational piece. As I said, the example about violence, where we look at the acute phase of treatment for people coming into an ER. And I think a more subtle issue, but a very real one that's not, again, a criminal justice issue, is the idea of access to health services and the discrimination that exists in health services being delivered, be it around immigrant populations, be it around people of color. I think there's something, again, we can't let this just sit here as a legal problem because it's a social problem.
Thank you. Commissioner Filer, did you still have a question?
Well, the only thing I just, if you could talk more about the discussion you said with, right now with people feeling safe with the whole issue happening with ICE, and how do we trust our other structures that it's a safe haven to go to. I have great concerns that, if I'm an immigrant or whatever my status is, I'm scared of anything that has a government label on it. Forget just ICE or our police, So I was just hoping you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, I completely share your concern. And I think that this is one of these really tragic things that some people sending these messages are perfectly fine with. And that is individuals that will not utilize any kind of government agency for service at all. In fact, to take it even further, and something I know we've probably all heard in different ways, even the idea of going to your workplace now becomes high risk. Which of course, creates its own kind of backwash for, employers saying, I need a workforce, and you're saying you're going to take that away from me. I would like to think California may be able to establish some level of a standard of protection.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, really, to not be vague about this, the question I've really posed to some of my colleagues is to say, if you have school responsible for the safety of their students, and you have anyone representing an agency other than that institution that says, we are coming onto the campus to intercede or remove a child, what is our response? And I mean, I've seen some things that are now being rolled out in different states. I think it's I really think it's the kind of a thing that should be really a front and center discussion of saying, how do we keep people safe in our community? Again, it's not just law enforcement, but it includes education, includes the workplace.
And health services. If I go in for whatever, if I enter my information right there, I'm opening a window to, possibly being tracked or whatever,
No, completely. I mean, and to be really honest, if somebody were to say some of these things to me 10 years ago, I would have said, well, we have HIPAA, we have all these safeguards, we have ethics, and then you explain when you see that all of our data is being taken over by private parties. It's really hard to tell a person not to worry. It's hard to tell anyone, yet alone a community.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it really gets into, again, is the state ready? And I think we have the capacity here to do something to establish, like, we are going to have safeguards, but to make that extremely clear, which may be politically challenging. I'm a private citizen, but I appreciate that that's a message that some people will not be happy with, within our state. But if we don't do that, I mean, again, you know, I've had the experience of working in places like Argentina, in the Czech Republic. I've done a lot of work with some of my colleagues in Spain. And when they tell stories of the proceso, of Franco, of living under the Soviets, and, you know, they're saying basically, you don't share information, you don't talk about what you do, you're very careful with people that you love or that you like, because, you know, we don't know even who's going to inform on us. And
Yeah.
we're on the risk of that, of just changing something in our culture. And I don't think just saying, oh, well, the election will happen in 2 years, maybe, or 4 years, that's going to end it. If you change this culturally, we're going to change some things in a very, very fundamental way, and a very, very harmful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, of
Not
course.
thank you. This is not good, what we're saying, but you're
Well-
validating a lot of what I think is going on.
I would love to see, you know, what the commission does is connecting them with people in education and the public health community to say, we are seeing something which is bigger than just, are we documenting hate crimes, but to say, this is now sort of infused other parts of our culture.
Thank you. Because we're limited on time, I had one question, but I'll make it a yes or no. We had some wonderful presenters on restorative justice, which is actually listed in our statute as something that should be considered. I remember at the White House, you made just a wonderful presentation, and we were talking thereafter, and one of the things you said was, it's got to be really individualized, and you know, and there are sociopaths out there who can game the system. Our experts that we had previously talked about the importance of individualizing this, and also recognizing that you might be putting someone into a community that's been harmed. Is that an accurate rendition of what your opinions are?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it depends, but it depends. If you look at the whole field of sexual violence, one of the things that is really harmful is when you have a person confronting in a courtroom they're a sex offender, and the sex offender happens to be a true full-blown psychopath who will then enjoy the experience of terrifying their victim again. Yeah, even if they're going to go to prison for 10 years, they're very happy to do that. So I've seen that really blow up. And I kind of come back to the idea that if you're looking at forms of harassment, there is still a chance through restorative justice to educate and to turn people around. I have seen young people who joined hate groups and have seen them desist and leave those groups and really develop a very alternative ideology, as Rafe Ezekiel said 30 years ago. So I think that's possible, but I would really look at the issue of like the severity of the offense and also the severity of the offender. I mean, when I've tracked the criminal histories of hate crime offenders, yeah, a lot of them, these are first-time offense. For a lot of them, though, these are people with a very long track record. So is restorative justice exclusively for the services of the victim or for the community? If I got a person with 20 priors who's also gay bashing, I'm not going to think I'm going to change that person. And that's maybe me being just a little bit too blunt. But I then question the point of that. I mean, I am concerned about re-victimization, not whole cloth, but if we're not seeing this as being about hate violence, but about harassment and threat, something very relevant to our educational system and our healthcare system, there is, I think, a chance to turn the dialogue around and make something useful happen. And again, I've seen people who have desisted from having a hate-based lifestyle, and I've also seen people who have passed. I can think of somebody who once said, I'm so thrilled that I went through the Museum of Tolerance and they never knew I was a hate crime offender, and they felt more empowered because of that. So you have to be cautious. You have to be cautious.
Well, thank you. And we have one of the preeminent experts actually on this as a commissioner, Dr. Southers, who I'm sure we'll hear from on that at another time. Monica, do we have any public comment on Zoom or in the room?
No public comment.
All right, Kevin, do we have any emailed public comment?
No email public comment.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Dunbar. What a wonderful presentation. We could have kept you for a lot longer, but thank you so much. we're now going to move into something related, and that is discussion and action regarding the 2024-2025 annual report. And with that, we are going to have commission discussion first, I believe. Is that not correct, Deputy Director Watt?
I'll go ahead and provide an overview of the draft, if that's all right, and then we'll open it up to discussion.
Fantastic. Now, may I introduce you and Alec? If that would be okay? Or we're going to save that for when you're going to go over more of the CHIS directed material.
Oh, yeah, let's save it for the next agenda item, and I'll just...
Fantastic. The floor is yours, Assistant Deputy Director Watts.
Thank you, Chair Levin, and thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to introduce the second draft of the Commission's 2024 to 2025 annual report. So in my time today, what I want to do is start with a summary of changes we've made to the report since the March Commission meeting, and then discuss the process moving forward. So since that meeting, we received feedback from commissioners and members of the public on the first draft of the report. And what we did is we carefully reviewed all the feedback and made edits where appropriate. We also conducted additional fact-checking, data checking, and initial copy editing, which resulted in some additional minor edits. What I'd like to do too is highlight some of the more substantive changes that we made, and I'll just go through these. So first, we added a new section titled Patterns and Trends in Major Cities. This section summarizes some significant trends in hate crimes in major cities in California and nationally, which was informed by Chair Levin's data set and his preliminary analyses. Also, in response to Chair Levin's feedback, we added data visualizations of the California DOJ hate crime data, as well as the FBI hate crime data. Second, we added a few additional data points and news stories throughout Chapter 2, which you might remember summarizes patterns and trends in hate crimes. For instance, we added data points on fatal violence against transgender people and data from Stop AAPI Hate's news survey. Third, we added a few additional methodological details about the CHIS data set, which we'll talk about in the next agenda item. Fourth, we revised the description of Penal Code Section 13023E to clarify that this statute requires law enforcement agencies to post hate crime data to their websites monthly, only if adequate funding is available. So we did a little bit of additional research, and then we revised our text accordingly. Number 5, in Chapter 4 on prevention, we also added interim policy recommendations related to public messaging. And these were the recommendations that we issued in the 2023 to 2024 report. We just sort of added these as a reminder of the Commission's previous recommendations. Also in Chapter 4, we provided additional details about our guiding principle to improve procedures and processes for reporting hate in schools. What these edits did is emphasize the importance of creating a school culture where students feel safe reporting hate, and also providing professional development to teachers and staff on responding to reports of hate. Number 7, we added 2 appendices. One was Appendix D, which lists the personnel of the Commission, and we also added Appendix E, which contains visualizations of national trends in hate crimes in the FBI data per Chair Levin's suggestion. So those were the main substantive edits. As a final note, I just do want to thank the Research and Policy Unit for all their hard work on this: Monica Chavez, Rebecca Goodsell, Dave Cockstein, and Kevin Thomas. Now moving forward, after the Commission votes to move the report forward, we will add an executive summary, chair letter, CRD director letter, and the table of contents. We will also copy edit, format citations, and format the sort of graphic design of the report, and then we will send that version to the governor's office. In the meeting today, just a reminder of the process, actually last year what we did is the Commission voted to move the report forward in May to the governor's office, delegating non-substantive changes to staff and the chair. Today, the commission could vote on a similar motion if you felt, if you all were prepared to do that. So with that, I just want to thank you for your time. I will now turn it back to Chair Levin to open it up to commissioner discussion and answer any questions you might have.
And I'd like to turn it over to my fellow commissioners if they have any questions, comments, criticisms, or suggestions. Commissioner Salcedo.
Yeah, well, first I just want to extend my appreciation to Mr. Watts and the team and everybody who has contributed to make sure that we have this amazing new report in place. And I just want to really appreciate the hard work that has been put into all of this. So thank you so much to the team.
Thank you. Do we have any other commissioner comments?
Vice Chair Jansky.
Thank
Please.
you. I appreciate the work that went into this report. It looks well, it reads well. I think the edits that were made increases the readability. As I was rereading it today, one of the things I was curious about is why we might not have included a section talking about the Stop Hate Littering Act that was passed last year and signed by the governor in September. It's called AB 3024 by Assemblymember Chris Ward. I think it would be a lovely addition to our report. I'm just not sure what section it would fit into. And if there's any way to track the effect that that law might be happening on hate crimes moving forward, that's something I'd like to see us track.
Thank you. Vice Chair Dembski, thank you. Do we have any other suggestions or comments from the commissioners?
No additional commissioner comment.
All right, just since I like to go last with this, one thing that I had brought up, there was an issue with regard to, and I apologize that the report has this, and they've done a beautiful job, and I've been quite repetitive in the well-deserved compliments to the Civil Rights Department staff on this. The one thing that came up is that apparently, and we'll have to, this is one of the things we're going to have to look at, in the cases, the victims that were not counted by LA County, there were anti-Hindu hate crimes that did not otherwise get into a state enumeration. So if the only suggestion I'd like to have is just something where we review that particular aspect and see what we can come up with respect to that particular gap for this faith community in the enumeration of data. We had just this year a terrible vandalism of a Hindu house of worship here in Southern California, and I called the congregation. So that's just one thing. If there's no other questions, can we go? Do we go to the public now, or can we vote on motions? Deputy Director Watts.
We should take public comment before.
All right, so we'll take if there's any public comment, Monica, that you see either in the room,
Yeah,
or,
from some over Zoom.
or over Zoom. Thank you. Let's take that, and then we'll get to Kevin if he has any emailed public comment. But first, we'll go to comments that you're looking at, Monica. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Levin. I really appreciated your comment a little while ago about anti-Hindu hate not being, its own category. And I so appreciate that because, we've seen a series of targeted anti-Hindu attacks against our places of worship. And the most recent one was the one you just mentioned in Chino Hills, but there have been several in Northern and Central California as well. The one before this was in Sacramento. There were a few in Alameda County where I live. So I work as part of the nation's largest and oldest civil rights organization called the Hindu American Foundation. We represent the rights of the Hindu community, and we have reached out in the past to request an additional category for Hindu Americans because for faith-based targeted hate, we were right behind the Jewish community. And our community has been living in fear, even to go to places of worship and pray freely. And we would really, really appreciate if this can be taken into consideration while making the edits in the draft. Thank you so much.
And thank you. And let me just be very clear about this. There is no place in our state for violence or intimidation with respect to people of faith and people with no faith. And we are going to endeavor to make sure that this continues to remain a key focus of what we do. One quick clarification. Anti-Hindu hate crime are enumerated by both California law enforcement authorities and federal authorities, and it is a distinct standalone category under the religion hate crime category. But thank you so much. And again, I want to also just now that I'm on video as opposed to just making a call, I want our congregations to know that we take this seriously, and thank you for your input. Are there any comments, Kevin, from the aspects that you review by email?
We still have Zoom public comment.
Monica, clean me up here. Let's go to the next person with public comment. I apologize.
Greg DeJear.
Thank you. Now I only have 2 minutes, and I don't want critical comments I'm about to make to undermine in any way the great admiration I have for this report. It's very thorough. It covers very well those things that it chooses to cover. My criticism is the things that it leaves out. Specifically, specific recommendations for action. When Assemblyman Bloom and you, Chairman Levin, were leading the charge to create this commission, the main argument was the commission would consist of experts, would hear other expert testimony, would hear from the public, and would make recommendations. It's amazing to me that the recommendations are, for the most part, very vague. Particularly, I guess I should wait to comment under the comment at the end for things that should be the actions that the commission should take in the coming year to make recommendations to the legislature, as Assemblyman Ward, you remember, asked for. He said, look forward to your recommendations. I do have a question, and I'm not sure who to address it to. Will this report be done in a timely way that is issued by July 1st, as required by the statute? And if not, what legal authority is there for the commission to delay issuing its report for 8 months, as it did this year, waiting for the governor? There's nothing in the statute that creates the commission, Senator Bloom's bill, quite explicit that you shall report to the legislature and the governor and other agencies by July 1st of each year. Is there some legal authority that allows you to ignore that legal authority?
Is there anyone that would like to address that? I will just say we are endeavoring to provide the latest and most substantive research available, and it is our plan to get this released as soon as possible. But thank you so much for your question. Are there any other public comments?
No public comments in the room or on Zoom.
Okay. With that, are there any motions with respect to the report? We had one last year. Is there anyone that would like to make that motion or any other one with respect to this just tremendously effective and dense report that, again, my gratitude to all the staff that did such a beautiful job on this.
Chair, just a point of clarification. Are you asking for someone to put a motion forward to approve the report as is? Is that what you're asking?
Well, I'm asking for a motion with respect to the report, but if someone wants to approve it as is, they certainly can make that motion.
I have a procedural question, Chair.
Sure.
I know that we would like to get this report approved and published as soon as possible. I'm wondering if it's possible today to make a motion to approve it with an addition of a section about the Stop Hate Littering Act. Is that something we can do as a motion here today?
I think that can be included in a motion. But I will defer to my legislative expert, Dr. Watts, who doesn't show off about stuff, but has significant experience with the legislature. But I don't think there's anything stopping us from putting that in.
I think that's right. We could do I'm by no means an expert on this, but sure, we could do a motion that says perhaps the commission votes to advance the report and delegate one change. It sounds like the Stop the Hate Littering Act, including a summary of it, to the chair and staff, and then move it along from there. The alternative would be to wait until the next commission meeting to move the report along, which would put us behind by a few weeks. But
also, and I'm sorry, Commissioner Chair, get to you just 1 second. To the extent we could also have a motion that delegates changes to the staff and the chair, and as chair, you know, I would include that on your suggestion anyway. So in other words, we can specifically put that in, or I'm happy to, when things are delegated to me, say, hey, I would like this particular piece of legislation to get in there. Commissioner Che, thank you.
That was actually what I was going to suggest, that I thought we were voting on a motion to advance the report, hearing additional comment and for the chair and staff to consider inclusion and also where it should be included in the report.
Would you like to make a motion, Commissioner? Or I believe the chair can, but I always prefer for my fellow commissioners to introduce motions whenever possible. But if you'd like to make a motion that approves the report and delegates non-substantive changes to staff, the chair and the vice chair, or something like that, I'm happy to take that. But I don't want to put words into anyone's mouth at all.
Well, I'm happy to put forward a motion which would include taking into consideration what's been shared during this meeting for the chair and the staff to weigh and to also determine where to best to include that information.
So, so you're making that as a motion?
Yes, I am.
Yes.
Okay.
And I am seconding that.
Thank you, Commissioner Salcedo, who is seconding that motion. So I just want to make sure that that we have this, because we're going to go for a vote now, that we are approving the report and delegating non-substantive changes to staff and the chair, or was it the staff, the chair, and the vice chair in there? I just want to make sure that I'm getting it correct before we go for a vote. Dr. Watts, did you get the motion down? I just want to make sure we vote on the exact thing that Commissioner Che proposed and Commissioner Salcedo seconded.
So I think what I'd recommend is what I heard from you, Commissioner Che, was take into consideration what's been shared in this meeting and determine where to put it in the report. What's been shared seems as if it's substantive. So in that sense, what I would say is take into consideration what's been shared in the meeting and determine where to put it in the report, as well as additional non-substantive changes to be delegated to the chair, vice chair, and staff. It's a bit lengthy, but does that sound like what we're all thinking? Okay.
I think you captured the spirit of the motion.
Thank you. Oh, no, I didn't mean to cut you off. No, please, I'm sorry.
No, that was please go forward.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this motion. Alec, I believe you take the roll call on the votes. So if you would on this motion, thank you.
Okay, great. Chair Levin, we'll start with you.
I approve, yes.
Vice Chair Dembski.
Aye.
Commissioner Che.
Aye.
Commissioner Cuellar. Commissioner Filer.
Aye.
Commissioner Roybal. Commissioner Salcedo.
Aye.
Commissioner Suthers.
Aye.
Okay, I have 6 ayes and 0 noes, so the motion passes.
Fantastic. Then if I may move on to Roman numeral 5, the Civil Rights Department report and presentations by Dr. Watts and David Kalkstein. So let me just say a couple of words. First of all, he doesn't know that I'm saying this, but I am so thrilled that you are both of you are doing this together. Dr. Watts has a PhD from Stanford. He is also a Bulldog, University of Georgia. Got to be careful here. Got to make sure I put that in, so people wouldn't know what I was saying. And was given a very prestigious fellowship by, I believe it was California Science and Technology. And he also did work with regard to our assembly and the judiciary committee of our assembly. So when you see this talent at our meetings, you know where it comes from. And I didn't tell him I was going to mention this, but we're just so lucky to have you, and thank you. And now another person that we're lucky to have is David Kalkstein, who joined CRD as a research data specialist in the Research and Strategic Initiative Unit to support our commission in September. He earned his BA in psychology and sociology from Cornell University, which my son tells me is the top college in the United States. My son is a student there. And he also graduated from NYU, where he got his PhD in social psychology. After that, he joined the Stanford Psychology Department as a postdoctoral research fellow. Here, his research has focused on using psychological theory to develop real-world interventions that address pressing social issues, such as inequalities in educational experiences and outcomes. And that complements, by the way, Dr. Watts's background, where he also enumerated and codified research with respect to discrimination, particularly with the LGBTQ+ community. So we are really getting treated. And if I may, as we saw today with the presentation by Dr. Dunbar, victims are more than numbers. And this report, which the Civil Rights Department and our commission have worked on, and thank you so much, staff, for the Civil Rights Department, is groundbreaking. And the study that is going to be discussed today is not only groundbreaking, but it is desperately needed. I was just informed this week that the second study that I was involved on hate crime that had some federal funding was also eliminated. So the fact that now the states are taking the lead with getting experts before the public and with regard to getting expert reports to the public is nothing short of critical. I want to thank you all, and without further ado, Assistant Deputy Director Watts and our research data specialist, David Kalkstein. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair Levin, and thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to present our findings from the 2023 California Health Interview Survey, also known as CHIS. Just to give you some context about this project, I think many of these data points are summarized in the annual report, but we thought it'd be good to spend some time discussing it in this meeting. But today what I'll do is I'll start by giving you some background on what exactly the CHIS is and why we partnered with them. I'll then turn it over to Dave to provide an overview of our findings. So what is the California Health Interview Survey? It is an annual survey administered by the UCLA Center for Health Policy Research. What they do is they interview 20,000 households across California each year with a survey that contains over 20 topics related to health, including questions related to hate. The survey is conducted in such a way as to be representative of California's population, meaning what we can do with this data set is make inferences about patterns and trends statewide and in many sort of smaller geographic areas within California using this data. Next slide, please. So this is just an overview of the partnership between CRD, the Commission, and CHIS. We've started this work all the way back in June 2022, before the launch of the Commission, actually. California versus Hate and CRD developed questions for the 2023 CHIS. That just gives you an idea of how much of an investment these sort of projects are. In January 2023, the data collection for the data set that we'll talk about today began. In June of 2023, a few months after the Commission was launched, the Commission joined this partnership between California versus Hate, CRD, and CHIS. At the end of December, the 2023 CHIS data collection ended, and we'll talk about that data set today. We also funded studies in 2024. That data set will be out in October of this year. We also, I believe we already have a data set running for 2025. Yeah, we do. And we funded inclusion of hate questions in that survey as well. So lots of data that is coming down the pipeline, and we just got the data back in October 2024 from our partnership that began in June 2022. Anyway, but I think the most important part is what we found. So could we go to the next slide, please, Dave? Right, so I'll start with research goals of why we set up this partnership. Essentially, what we were hoping to do is understand patterns and trends in hate in California a little more deeply using this data. These patterns and trends include the number of Californians who experience and witness hate each year, the types of hate-motivated offenses that are affecting Californians, the bias motivations of hate acts, so what is the basis for people being targeted, locations of hate acts, where these are happening, and how hate impacts different communities and groups across the state differently. So that's what we'll talk about today. And for the remainder of the presentation, I'll turn it over to Dave Kalkstein.
Okay. Thank you, Alec. And thank you, Brian, for that introduction. Yes, like Alec mentioned, for the rest of this presentation, I'm going to present some results from analysis of the CHIS survey. This will be analyses from the 2023 CHIS survey. So the first question we looked at was the prevalence of hate in California in 2023. Specifically, we looked at the number of Californians who directly experienced a hate act within the last 12 months of taking the survey. To define hate act, here we're conceptualizing a hate act as any hostile event, expression, or action that's motivated by a bias against a person's actual or perceived identities. So this data that I'm going to present today includes both people who experienced hate crimes and people who experienced non-criminal hate incidents. So using the CHIS, we estimate that over 2.5 million Californians experienced at least one act of hate within the last 12 months. This corresponds to 8% of people within California who are 12 or older. Next, we looked at the rates of people witnessing hate in California. And here we estimate that nearly 5 million Californians witnessed hate in the last 12 months, which is almost twice as many people who directly experienced hate. So we think this data point is really important to consider and to collect when trying to understand the prevalence of hate across the state. As was talked about earlier, not only are non-criminal hate incidents also traumatic for individuals, but even just witnessing hate can cause serious negative psychological, social, and health impacts on individuals, even if they haven't directly experienced the hate themselves. So overall, with these two initial data points, what we're seeing is alarmingly high rates of hate across the state. So next, we looked at the prevalence of hate amongst adults and teens separately. So the graph that I'm about to show you depicts the estimated percent of adults and teens who directly experienced hate and who witnessed at least one hate act in the last 12 months. So starting with direct experience, I'm putting up two bars here. The blue bar represents the percent of adults who directly experienced hate within the last 12 months. And the red bar represents the percent of teens who directly experienced hate within the last 12 months. And what you can see is that teens are more than twice as likely to have directly experienced hate in the last 12 months as adults, with around 15% of teens having experienced hate within the last year. So similarly, when we look at rates of witnessing hate using the CHIS, we estimate that teens are also more than twice as likely as adults to witness hate within the last year, with an estimated 30% of teens, or almost a third of teens, having witnessed at least one hate incident within the last year. So these analyses give us some insights into the rates at which people are experiencing, both directly experiencing and witnessing hate across the state. Next, I'm going to turn to more detailed analysis on the types of hate acts that people are experiencing. So the CHIS survey, if somebody indicated that they had experienced a hate act within the last 12 months, they were then presented with a series of questions. One of them was the type of offense that they had experienced. So this graph here is going to show the most common types of hate acts that people experience. Those are listed on the y-axis. And the bars that I just put up represent the percent of hate victims who experienced that particular offense. So for example, this graph shows that 83% of people who experienced at least one hate act experienced verbal abuse or insult. So there's a couple of things that are important to note and to be careful about when interpreting this data. First, the stats here represent the percent of hate victims who experienced each type of offense. So these are not the percent of hate acts belonging to each category. This point will be true throughout this presentation. All of the stats that I'm putting up refer to the number or percent of people and not the number or percent of acts. So the reason this distinction matters is that the same person could have experienced multiple acts of hate within a given year, but in our data set, they're only counted once as an individual who experienced at least one act of hate. So this might lead to our data undercounting the actual number of hate acts that are occurring in California within a given year. And a second interesting thing to note is that many people are experiencing multiple types of offenses. Because of how the data was collected and limitations of the survey, we can't know whether this means that people are experiencing multiple offenses within the same event. So for example, verbal insults going along with physical attack, or whether this means people are experiencing multiple events, each of different types of offenses. Within this list of offenses, there's two that we were particularly interested in pulling out and looking at. And that is property damage and physical abuse or attack. And the reason we're pulling these out is that these most closely map onto what's tracked in other data sets like the DOJ. These are offenses that are most likely to be criminal, whereas the other ones are less likely to be criminal or may not be criminal. So pulling these two out, we're using these to approximate, come close to numbers that are estimated in other data sets. So looking at hate-motivated property damage and physical violence specifically, we estimate that around 439,000 adults in California experienced a hate-motivated property damage or physical violence event within the last year. Amongst teens, we estimate that this was about 86,000 people. This corresponds to 1.6% of the adult population and 2.7% of the teen population experiencing these type of hate-motivated property damage or physical violent events. So comparing these to the DOJ, what the DOJ tracks are hate crimes specifically. So these are hate acts that rise to the level of a criminal offense. Across the years 2022 and 2023, the DOJ reports an average of 1,200 adult victims of hate crimes and about 100 youth victims of hate crimes per year. So comparing these two numbers to each other suggests an overwhelming amount of hate crimes or potentially hate crimes are not represented in DOJ data. So this suggests that less than 1% of people who experience hate-motivated property damage or physical violence are showing up in official DOJ reports. So to give you a sense visually, here's a graph depicting the difference in what we estimate from the CHIS, the number of people who experienced hate-motivated property damage and physical violence, and what's captured by the DOJ in their hate crime reports. So as you can see, these differences are overwhelming and staggering. One thing, again, to be careful in our data analysis and conclusions that we draw that's important to note is that these numbers and estimates, particularly from the CHIS, should not be treated as exact estimates. These, you can think about this as sort of ballpark estimates. They give a sense of the magnitude of the discrepancy between what people are reporting and experiencing and what's captured by the DOJ data, but they're certainly imperfect. The way that we're looking only at hate-motivated property damage and physical violence, which may not capture the entire universe of hate crimes, and it may also include certain types of experiences that may not rise to the level of a criminal offense. So that's just to say that this is an imperfect comparison. Still, these numbers are useful for giving a general picture of the magnitude of underreporting that may be going on in California. So next, I'm going to zoom out and return to hate acts generally, not just property damage and physical violence, and use the CHIS to understand where Californians are experiencing hate. So the graphs that I'm about to display show the percentage of hate victims who experienced hate in a variety of locations. So first, I'm going to show you estimates of where adults experienced hate. On the y-axis are different locations that people may have experienced hate. And each bar on this graph represents the percent of hate victims who experienced a hate act in this specific location. So looking at adults, you can see that the most common places where adults experienced hate were in public places. 45% of adults who experienced hate experienced it on the sidewalk or on the street. 34% experienced hate at a business. You'll see that the percentages in this graph add up to more than 100%, and that's because participants could select more than one location. So looking now at where teens are experiencing hate, we can see that by far the most common location is at school, with 80% of teen hate victims having experienced a hate event at school. So this is followed by online hate with 24%. So I'll leave this up here for just a second, give you a chance to take in these numbers. What's interesting about these numbers is that these charts give us opportunity to provide insight into where hate is occurring that go beyond what's available in other data sets like the DOJ. For instance, both work and especially school are much smaller percentage of hate locations in the DOJ than what we estimate using the CHIS. Additionally, online hate is almost non-existent in the DOJ data set, For example, for teens, there's 0 recorded instances of hate crimes occurring online. And there's many reasons for these discrepancies. These could be underreporting discrepancies. It could be that the events that happen in places like school or work tend to be handled internally by those institutions. Or it could be that a lot of these events don't rise to the level of a criminal offense. For example, online hate. It's hard to think about how online hate might be criminal in nature. Still, what's important here, or what's valuable here, is that by looking at using the CHIS and using a public health survey and defining hate more broadly, we're able to get a much more accurate or a much broader view of the landscape of hate across the state of California. So if you remember, the last set of questions that we asked CHIS participants was about the reasons that they were targeted for hate. So this question is analogous to information presented in similar reports as bias motivations for a hate incident or a hate act. So in the graph here, what I'm going to show you is the percent of hate victims who are targeted for each reason. On the y-axis is each sort of bias motivation category. The bars here again represent the percent of hate victims from the overall population who are targeted for each reason. You can see that race or skin color is by far the most common reason that people are targeted, followed by ancestry, national origin, or language. Again, I'll put this up, give you all a minute to look through this data, take in these numbers. An interesting thing to note again here is that people can select multiple bias motivations, and we estimate that over 1/3 of people who experienced a hate act in the last year were targeted for hate based on multiple motivations or biases. Unfortunately, because of limitations with the CHIS and how the data was collected, we can't be sure exactly what this means. It can mean that people experience a single act of hate that was motivated by multiple biases, or it could mean that the same individual was targeted for multiple hate acts, each motivated by different biases. Still, even with this ambiguity, this data point is interesting in that it starts to speak a little bit, at least, to the increased risk that people with intersectional identities may face regarding hate. So the last set of data of analyses that I'm going to present are analyses looking at hate as experienced by different groups and impacts in different communities. Something that CHIS allows us to do is look at the percentage of people within different groups who have experienced hate within the last 12 months. So on this bar, on this graph, different bars are going to represent different racial or ethnic groups, and the height of bars will indicate what percentage of adults within each group are estimated to have directly experienced a hate act in the last 12 months. So this dotted line that I put across the middle of the graph represents the overall percentage of adults who experienced a hate act in the last 12 months. That line is up here for comparison. For adults, that number is about 7%. Looking at the data, a general pattern that emerges is that people of color and people from communities of people of color are much more likely to experience hate than the state average. So what's interesting and exciting about this data relative to other data sets is that typically bias motivations are presented as a percent of total hate acts. And the limitation of looking at data in this way is that it can very easily lead to certain populations getting overlooked. So for example, because Native Americans are a relatively small population in California, a small percentage of the population, anti-Native American bias is typically only a small percentage of hate crimes reported by the DOJ in a given year. But when you look at the data this way and look at the percentage of people within that group who experience hate, it becomes clear that the Native American community or the American Indian community experiences hate at significantly elevated rates, and that's a significant problem facing that community. So the last analysis that I'm going to present today looks at the rates of hate victimization across a variety of other groups. So again, the dotted line here represents the overall state rate for adults. And the bars here represent the percentage of people within that community who have experienced a hate act within the last 12 years. So looking at this graph, again, we can see that groups that historically...
David, did you mean 12 months?
12 months, yeah,
Sorry.
Thank you, 12 months. yeah, all the data points here refer to hate experience within the last year. What you can see is that groups that historically face hate continue to face hate at disproportionately high rates. Two observations in particular that stand out are the exceptionally high rates of hate experienced by the transgender and gender expansive community and people with unstable housing. So what do we learn from the CHIS? We learned that hate is much more prevalent across the state than what other official government data may suggest. An estimated 2.6 million Californians, or nearly 8% of Californians, have experienced at least one act of hate in the past year. We find that people, and adults in particular, are often experiencing hate in public places like streets, sidewalks, or businesses. We find that teens experience an elevated rates of hate, almost twice the prevalence of hate that is observed in adults. For teens, the most common places to experience hate are in school and online. And finally, we see that groups that are historically targeted by hate continue to experience elevated levels of hate across the state. Going forward, we have some really exciting future directions. As Alec mentioned at the beginning, we're still collecting data, and we'll receive data from the 2024 CHIS this fall. In the 2024 CHIS, we've included some new questions. So this will allow us, well, first taking the old questions, we can combine data across 2 years, which will allow for more analyses and more ability to explore patterns and effects across smaller populations. With the new questions, we'll be able to investigate some of the impacts of hate that people experience, the types of support that people use and wish they had access to, and more information on who offenders of hate are in relation to the person experiencing the hate act. Additionally, we'll have the opportunity for some qualitative data collection. Some people will be pulled out and asked to participate in an extended interview of their experience and ask more information to give more in-depth answers beyond just survey questions. So if you are interested in any of the data that I present today or seeing it online, there's 2 places that you can look. Monica, will you please put these in the chat? The first is a link to the infographic that our department has developed that contains a lot of the data points that I went over in the presentation today. The second place that's very cool is going to the CHIS website itself and using a tool that the CHIS team developed called Ask CHIS. This tool allows you to explore the data set directly yourself. It allows you to select variables across the entire CHIS survey. So you can look at the hate questions, discrimination, as well as a variety of public health measures. And then you can compare, once you select a variable, you can look at descriptive statistics of rates and counts of people within those groups. You can compare populations, compare regions of the state. Overall, it's a really cool tool. And if you're interested in looking at the data, I highly encourage you to check it out. It's also very helpful. They have a lot of guides on how to use this data. So with that, I'm going to wrap up, say thank you all for your attention. Thank you to my research team for helping with these analyses and to the CHIS staff. CHIS has been a great partner to work with. We hope to continue the partnership. And they've been very instrumental in helping us use this data to extract these insights. So now I'll open it up for questions. If anybody has questions about this data or about the CHIS project.
And thank you so much.
Vice Chair Jansky.
Thank you. Thank you, David and Alec. That was very very interesting. I found myself wondering whether future work on this project might expand into communities that have not been historically studied. For instance, we have President Trump is recently interested in exploring anti-Christian bias. I'm wondering whether the study might be looking at groups like that in the future. Thank you.
Oh, go ahead, Alec.
Go ahead, Dave.
One limitation of the CHIS is that they do not collect demographic information about religious identification. This is something that we and other groups have raised multiple times, but it's a logistics constraint on how long the survey is and the amount of information they can include. But we would love to have that information to investigate questions exactly like that.
Thank you.
And just to sort of plug our upcoming research in the pipeline, as Dave mentioned, we did fund about 50 qualitative interviews with people who took the survey. And the idea with this is to really focus on groups who may be less well represented in the survey data itself. And I think, if I remember correctly, I believe we aligned on a sample that was focused mostly on people for whom English may be a second language, or they primarily speak a language other than English. And the idea is a lot of those groups don't show up in the data, in the quantitative data as much. So we really wanted to focus on them through the qualitative research. So.
Are there any other questions? Now, Alec, do we have to move to public questions on this, or do we go to the next
Yes, we should take public comment.
agenda? Because I didn't see questions from the public on my agenda, but I think there might be people in the public who'd like to ask something.
Craig DeGier?
Thank you to UCLA and the department for speaking strictly from the point of view for the moment of disability community. This is the best survey that I've seen for California, or probably for the country, about anti-disability hate crimes. Question is, it appears to me that the survey, I'll say, conflates hate with bias as defined in the hate crimes law. That might not matter much for some communities, but for the disability community, it matters a lot. That a lot of the crimes against people with disabilities are not motivated, that are hate crimes, are not motivated by hate. They're motivated by things like callousness because of their disability, and vulnerability, or perception of vulnerability because of their disability, and therefore we only end up with 8% reporting hate, which is still a very valuable figure, because we haven't had any solid research that supported that at all. So we've got that now, and thank you. But it's still a gross undercount. Can you clarify that? Am I being overly well? Is that conflation between hate and hate crimes not true?
I can respond to this. It's a great point. It's a great point to raise. Something that the CHIS, it does in some ways kind of start to give insight into this. There's a question that is specifically, why were you targeted for hate? And disability is an option there. And that's where we see a number that you're referencing, or similar to the number you're referencing, that about 8% of hate acts reported in the CHIS, we estimate occur because of anti-disability bias. But this last set of data, looking at community-specific rates, we see that people living with disability, about 12% of the overall population has experienced a hate act within the last year. And that includes people who say that they were targeted specifically because of their disability, or people who are targeted for other reasons. So in some ways, it doesn't directly answer some of the things you brought up, but it does start to give us a sense of the rates of hate that people within that population are experiencing, in a way that's a little bit agnostic as to whether they're targeted specifically because of an anti-disability bias, or if it's targeted because of their vulnerability or some other kind of identity or some intersectional identity. But we are able to pull out those two numbers, which I think starts to speak to some of the issues that you raised.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the public, either by Zoom?
Yes, Gregory
Or-
May.
Thank you.
Hello, yeah, I'm curious as to, and I might have missed it, the definition that was used for hate in the survey, folks.
Yeah, I was prepared for this one. I can put it into the chat. That'll be the easiest way to see it. It was generally consistent with how hate is conceptualized by the CRD. Yeah, you can see in the chat, we define it as the next set of questions, or this is what participants are told before they start to answer the questions. They're told the next set of questions focuses on whether you may have been targeted for hate because of prejudice towards people with certain characteristics or religious beliefs. You may or may not actually have these characteristics or religious beliefs. It is different from someone targeting you for other reasons, such as being angry or wanting to get something from you. And hate incidents can include physical abuse, verbal abuse, cyberbullying, property damage, or something else. And then after they're given sort of this intro, the next question they're asked is, have you directly experienced a hate incident it says hate incident within the last 12 months. And then they're given the rest of the questions about location, type of offense, and reason. So this is the understanding that they're working from.
Thank you. Very impressive survey.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments or questions in the room or by Zoom?
Yeah, Terry via McDowell.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello. I am working in LA County and I presented this question to you via an email at the UCLA Health Policy Institute. We are seeing an increase in bias motivated bullying, and this information anecdotally came from the prosecutorial agencies that we are working with. That got our attention, and so my question is there any way that we can get a breakdown for LA County for school-age children who are reporting hate or bias, so that we can get a better understanding of what the heck's going on?
Yeah, great question. Super interesting statistics to be looking at. This is where Ask CHIS will be very useful. You can go onto Ask CHIS. You can select the county you're interested in, so you'll be able to select LA County. There you can find our variable of have you directly experienced a hate act, and you can also limit the population to school age. School age kids, it only goes down to age 12, so you can limit the population to 12 to 17 or 12 to 18. A methodological note, the CHIS has two surveys, one for teens, and that's administered to people aged 12 to 17, and one for adults, people aged 18 plus. So if you were looking on Ask CHIS, you might want to limit the age range to 12 to 17, although you can select whatever you want. You could have it be 12 to 18 or higher as well. But yeah, I would check out Ask CHIS. That is an online website that will give you the ability to look at this information directly.
Thank you. Are there any other questions by Zoom or in the room?
No other questions via Zoom or the room.
Kevin, do we have any questions that you're getting by email?
No questions, no comments by email.
All right, then before I move on, I really want to again just reiterate my thanks to David Kalstein, to Kevin Thomas, to Rebecca Goodsell, to Monica Chavez, To Alec, what a wonderful job. To Dr. Watts, and I don't know if he's here or not, but to our director, Kevin Kish, who had this vision and this foresight. And a couple of other commissioners that I must thank. One is Commissioner Sinar, who we worked with on tweaking out questions, and to Commissioner Che, who joined with us after her departure. But just 1 second here. I know we're getting a little behind. This type of study is a landmark study. I've been doing this stuff for 4 decades. We are not going to be getting analogs from the federal government. In addition, the way in which it was conducted with the depth and the breadth of the questions was different, I think, than anything we've seen. And it complements other research that we have, and it gives voice to the fact of what I said about these informational deserts with respect to certain types of biases and certain geographies. So just hats off. This is a landmark study, and I can guarantee you that this is going to be cited internationally. So just to all my colleagues who are commissioners, the folks at UCLA, go Bruins. Sorry about that, Commissioner Sellers, and and the folks from CRD who really led this effort going forward. And as we can see, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of crime victims, and then millions of others who experience similar trauma, as we just saw from our complimentary presentation before. Just wanted to tie that up. We're going to go now to the agenda item 6, but I would be remiss if I didn't express my earnest gratitude for this just fantastic work. Agenda item number 6, our chair, vice chair, and subcommittee updates. I am going to start with our vice chair to lead this off. Thank you so much, Vice Chair Damsky.
Thank you, Chair Levin. Specifically, thank you for asking me to share some remarks in our meetings as vice chair. Today, I want to talk a little bit about free speech and some things I've been encountering in my communities. Through my connections in multiple communities recently, people have been approaching me asking for help with conflicts that are arising out of concern that free speech by certain individuals may very well incite hatred and violence towards members of their communities. We as a commission have been seeing and tracking the statistics of hate crimes and bias since our inception. Here I want to share some snippets of recent conversations in the spirit that they may inspire more generous and community-building interactions where these conflicts are arising. Question: what is the desired outcome of conversations with organizers of an event, if not to demand for a particular performer to be removed from a program? To allow such a performer in our community would promote hate speech against us. Answer: fostering positive relationships and mutual understanding with a large community organization which can be a valuable partner and ally would be one very desirable outcome. That said, there is a difference between making an ask and making a demand. We all live in the same world together. It is preferable if we can do so with mutual agreements and understanding. If it is possible to educate the organization on why something is hateful or dangerous, it seems to me that this is the place to start the conversation. We must also be aware that there is a difference between protecting free speech and promoting hate speech. To our mutual frustration, I assure you hate speech is legal. Given that these organizations are involved in legal matters, I imagine this legality issue informs their stance with regards to protecting free speech. And I agree that our community should not be subjected to enduring hate speech, and it should not be normalized, not for this community nor for any other. On this point, I think we are all on the same page. Question: if one of the performers will be caught in hate speech against members of its own community, do you see any remote possibility that that performer would not be canceled? Why then should members of a different community, ours, be ready to accept it when someone at that event incites hate against our community? Answer: If a performer at an event is caught in hate speech against its own community, I would absolutely expect that community to cancel and remove that performer with haste, no question. Similarly, if a performer at an event in our own community was caught in hate speech against us, I would expect the same response. This would be policing of one's own community, but that is not what we are talking about here. We are talking about policing another community. In an ideal world, yes, every community would police itself against allowing hate speech against all peoples. Question. Please consider our demands, because if we would not take a strong stand, there will be no one who will do it for us. Answer. Making demands is a difficult place for beginning negotiations and generating understanding. I do believe it is important to stand firm in our own knowledge and experience of that which is hateful and dangerous to us, and that, yes, we have the responsibility to communicate that well and in good faith. I also believe this. It is righteous to speak out against hate speech of any kind, whether it is legal and because it is so. Educate about it, inform others, ask for change, do not accept it as normal. Start from the benign position of problem solving in this world that we share. Look for what may be possible that we have not yet considered and build on that. It is also important in our dealings on behalf of each other to remember that no community is a monolith. However, each community's great variedness is not well known nor understood by those outside of itself. So whenever a few posit themselves as, quote, representing their community, it indeed reflects on all community members collectively and individually, whether or not they are all ascribing to the same position or strategy. I personally believe it is better to build relationships with 50 strong allies than to cancel one performance. It is better to build relationships than to destroy the possibility of building them, unintentionally creating more isolation. We live in an imperfect world with imperfect outcomes, and I expect this situation will have one of those imperfect outcomes, because no matter what this organization decides, some will feel validated by their position and some will feel outraged, because the situation itself is polarized. That is neither the community's fault nor the organization's. This is the political moment we are living in. We don't have control over what the organization decides to do, but we do have options on how we want to address this moment and how we will respond to their decision. I want to thank you, Chair and Commission, for the opportunity to share these thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vice Chair Damsky. I just have a few things to say for my chair statement before we go on to the committee reports. I'd like to start by wishing everyone a happy Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And it is notable, by the way, if I may, that while we're celebrating this month, at the end of last month, this is part of our history. Some of the most horrible and racist, terrible things were put forth over a century ago by a person who was Governor Leland Stanford. So when we talk about celebrating, we also should acknowledge the terrible history that took place in this state with regard to our Asian American and Native Hawaiian brothers and sisters. And there were a series of Supreme Court cases that came out of these horrible acts, which included limiting employment, excluding immigrants, among others. So while we celebrate, we also have to acknowledge. So thank you so much on that. Also, Jewish American Heritage Month. And I also want to say something to my Jewish brothers and sisters who have experienced a tremendous increase in hate crime recently. We're not going to leave a stone unturned when it comes to anti-Semitic hate, but also religious hate of all kinds. We also want to reflect on some important events that have taken place since the March meeting. Arab American Heritage Month has taken place, and what a rich community we have here in California with our Arab American brothers and sisters. So I want to wish that community as well good tidings. In addition, we had the Transgender Day of Visibility. Brian Levin, he, him, I stand with my brothers and sisters of the transgender community here in California. The law protects you, irrespective of what some legal ignoramuses might think in the internet sphere. And we have that mission. It is an ethical requirement. It is a statutory requirement, and we will not fall from it. And if you look at the terrible numbers that we saw about victimizations, I think that tells us what we need to know, and that is to make a community of caring for people, particularly young people. So thank you for that. Cesar Chavez Day. Cesar Chavez, who never abandoned his commitment to nonviolence. And of course, Dolores Huerta as well. Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day, which our governor made a very eloquent statement about just in the last week, where over 1.5 million Armenian people were killed. We remember and we honor them and that community too. Yom HaShoah. 80 years ago, my dad was liberated from a Nazi prisoner of war camp. And today, under the guise of fighting anti-Semitism, and I'll talk a little bit more about it during the section on civil liberties and civil rights. 80 years ago, my dad was liberated as an American POW. He's a felon. He lied about his age to join the army to fight the Nazis, but he was a pacifist, so he's a medic. So many families, Jewish families, including folks here on the Zoom, have had family that was affected or obliterated in the Holocaust. I want to extend to all people, whether Jewish or from other groups who have experienced grief, to know that before we get with anything, we're a community of caring. It is particularly egregious to me, and this is my personal statement, this is not a reflection of the commission or the wonderful Civil Rights Department, but I do have a First Amendment right to call some things out. When under the guise of fighting anti-Semitism, law firms, academic institutions, various parts of the Jewish community itself, research, and others are being impacted, where anti-Semitism, and we have hit records, modern records on this, so I'm not negating that. But what I will say is, when the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department goes from about 350 people to about 100, when we're seeing new executive orders talking about meritocracy and others about fighting anti-Semitism, but that cudgel is used to attack the civil rights and civil liberties of others that Jewish Americans have fought for, is an utter disgrace. Please, administration, don't tell me about your commitment to anti-Semitism when your selection for the U.S. Attorney for the nation's capital, defended and called exceptional, an insurrectionist who poses with a Hitlerian mustache and says Hitler didn't finish the job. Am I supposed to believe that you are coming from a place of protecting the Jewish American community, which I don't speak of on behalf of, but speak as one of them? I point to you, Rumeysa Ozturk, who on March 25th was grabbed off the streets by people in plain clothes with no law enforcement identification. And the Washington Post did a backgrounder and found that the government did not find any support for Hamas or anything else in her background. Yet she is now in federal custody and is at risk of getting deported. For what? For writing an op-ed in the tough student daily newspaper, where, by the way, she promoted something that I disagree with, the BDS sanctions, because they include academics. I don't think we should include academics in restrictions. Indeed, if we're going to find peace, we have to talk to one another. And if I believe in that principle, I have to support the principle when it applies to her and her ability to say what she passionately believes in a nonviolent and peaceful manner. So I wanted to make sure that I brought that up, because today there are many people talking about how it's all good to fight anti-Semitism. By the way, interestingly enough, the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act just was tabled because so many people were putting so many amendments on it, including one that said, from the definition that they selected, they didn't like the part that said blaming Jews for killing Jesus Christ was something that could be anti-Semitic. So it has to, if you're going to apply standards, they have to apply across the spectrum, not just to people you like, but to people that you may not like. So I'll go into a little bit more on that. Let me, but I want to be clear. We have now 16 lawsuits, California-based. So thank you. We have Attorney General's folks here. I want to thank them. I want to thank Commissioner Kish for standing up for what is right for the citizens of California. There are over 200 lawsuits against the administration. And just this week, we saw a rebuke about one particular law being used from the 1790s that is supposed to be used in wartime. And it was by a conservative-leaning judge. We have this over and over again. I listed it last time. We're going to have civil liberties and civil rights on the agenda going forward based on the kind of input that I am getting. Now, some non-controversial things. The Not in Our Town folks have pointed out that United Against Hate Week is coming up in October, and that it presents a marvelous opportunity for people to organize against that. I want to thank Patrice O'Neill, who we should get some time to discuss this. I also want to say that, do we have my slide, by the way? Can we just post that slide real quick, Alec? I just wanted to update before we get to some closing here. The final results from my multi-city study, there we go, show that here in California, we updated it. California, we're showing a 3% decrease. So prior, I had talked about how with those excluded LA cases, we had an increase really the year before, but we didn't get to count it, enumerate it. This year looks like a very small decrease. There is a lot of disclaimer with this, but let me just say, we are hovering at very high levels. For nationally, for the preliminary data from US major cities, the change in some California cities where their declines increased a bit, if you will, the new figure is down 1.8%. That's really margin of error territory. And the year prior, we saw a record. Incidentally, anti-Muslim hate crime was up 18%, and anti-Jewish hate crime was up 12%. The Anti-Defamation League recently came out with a report. They've changed their methodology, and there's been discussion about that. But let me just say that they saw in California over 1,300 incidents. Nationally, they found 58% of their incidents involved something around Israel. So even if you take those out, when you're talking about multiple data sets, we're talking about religious hate crimes increasing distinctly from the rest of the pack, if you will. So we have a lot of work cut out for us. What I'd like to do, especially after hearing the wonderful presentation by Vice Chair Damsky, is to say that I'm going to endeavor to get some peacemakers from different communities to talk about religious bigotry. So check in later on that. And just some closure things. I want to remind you that if you feel you're a victim of hate crime or a hate incident, you can contact the California versus Hate resource line to report that incident and to be connected with resources. It doesn't have to be a crime. As we've learned, there's a lot of trauma even with non-criminal incidents, as Commissioner Che has brought up quite effectively. And if, Monica, if you could send that link in the chat, and that's www.cavshate.org, and you see that on your screen. I also want to remind you about the free services available for communities through the California Civil Rights Department Community Conflict Resolution Unit, CREW. If your community is experiencing heightened fear, conflict, or tensions because of discriminatory practices, hate incidents, or hate crimes, CREW may be able to assist. They offer a wide range of conflict resolution and educational services to help communities effectively address hate and discrimination-based community conflict. All CREW services are free, voluntary, and confidential. CREW services can be requested by completing the request for services form online and emailing the form to ccru@calcivilrights.gov. And you can also see where on the web it is. And let me just say how important and how wonderful they are. We are now losing, it looks like, the services of the somewhat analogous Community Relations Service, which was actually headed up by our beloved Becky Monroe in previous years. So a lot of the work that is done, whether it's in CREW or enforcement of protections that are now being operationally eliminated, we are so thankful to have the California Civil Rights Department doing these protections in our state, as well as the governor and our Attorney General's office. So I'm going to get more on talking about civil liberties and my complete revulsion of the protection of my faith being used to interfere with the civil rights with people not only from other faiths, but from mine as well. The First Amendment still means something. So thank you. I'm now going to go to skip over Subcommittee on Patterns, Trends, and Prevention because we're going to have a statement by Commissioner Che on some of her excellent work. We're now going to go to Section D, Subcommittee on Resources, Support, and Response. Vice
Thank
Chair
you,
Dick.
Chair. Thank you. I have a very brief report from our committee this month. This month, our chair and research data specialist, Rebecca Goodsell, participated in several days of meetings with POST, the California Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, to work on revising an outdated video on hate crimes. This is a similar process to the one that POST did with our commission last year when we created the training video for Assembly Bill 449. There will be another week of meetings with POST to create content for the videos and to record them. If either Ms. Goodsell or Chair Levin would provide more details on those meetings, they're welcome to do so here. Also, in our last meeting, we discussed that there are some commissioners who are not currently assigned to any subcommittee. And I have decided that I would like to step down from this subcommittee and provide an opportunity for other commission members to consider taking my place in that service. That concludes my report. If either Ms. Goodsell or Chair Levin have anything to add, or even Commissioner Salcedo, you're welcome to have the floor.
I will defer to anyone else that would like to speak.
I don't have anything to add. Thank you so much.
Sure, Vice Chair Dempsey, thank you for that. Just in reference to the point that you referenced about the future meetings with POST, yes, we will be filming in June and then August the scenarios for the training videos as well as interviews.
Thank you, Rebecca.
And let me just say, she is and was a marvelous colleague during those sessions, and it's not just my opinion. If we could then move on to the Subcommittee on Community Forums with Commissioner Filer. I'm really looking forward to this as well.
Thank you. Well, we have been meeting to come up with the public forums for this year. So what we have is on May 22nd from 3 to 6, we're going to have our first community forum based on responses to hate against immigrants. So we're going to look at what's going on. I'm going to say community responses, how they've been handling and managing that. That one is going to be remote. So hopefully all of you will be able to attend. I encourage all of you to do that. Then in July, early August, we're hoping to have a forum on dialogue across differences. I don't think we have determined where that will be. Am I correct, Alec or Rebecca or?
That's
Mike?
correct. We're still working on a location.
Yeah. And then in fall, we're going to be doing a forum based in a rural community and looking on what's going on in that particular community to once again, we're trying to target all the different areas of California so that we can give voice to the different populations that are unique to that area. And I don't think we've determined where we're going to do that one either. As far as I know, we haven't determined that one. And then our last one will be another forum on hate in schools and particularly related to schools and disabilities. I think we found from the forum we had last year around disabilities, there was still a lot more to talk about. And so that will be our final one. And that will probably be, I'm going to say, late November, beginning of December. So more to come, but please, on the 22nd, if you can jump in on Zoom, I think that one's going to be a really interesting one, particularly based on what our speaker just addressed today on what's happening with the hate related to our immigrants and how communities are responding to that. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. what fantastic job that you've done, and so critically important. You've given voice to folks, and there's nothing more important than that. And just a heartfelt thank you, Commissioner Filer. What a wonderful person.
Well, I have to, let's thank Regina, Alec, David, Kevin. I mean, Regina and I, we have we are blessed to work with all of them because I feel like they make us look really good. We are involved, but they really do the hard work and putting these incredible forums together. But thank you, Chair, for saying that to me.
Noted and embraced that that gratitude. If we could go to commission discussion, if there are any commissioners that would like to say something.
Discussion about the reports.
I'm sorry.
Discussion about the reports.
A discussion about with respect to the various subcommittee presentations that were just made.
I don't have anything. Thank you, everybody.
Vice Chair Damsky.
Oh,
Nope,
you're
on mute.
Click the wrong button. I'm not sure if my comments are best here in for the subcommittee that is scheduling our public forums, or if it's best part of our general comments. But since we are going to be having a forum that's going to be focusing on education issues, I wanted to mention that I've been approached by members of various communities with an interest in seeing our commission have more in-depth discussion about anti-Jewish bias in the schools and also anti-trans bias in the schools. So I've been asked to bring that forward. So thank you for hearing that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioner statements or comments?
No additional commissioner comments.
All right. Monica, do we have public comment on Zoom or any public comment in the room?
No public comment on Zoom, no public comment in the room.
Oh, Vice Chair.
I have a question. We had a speaker earlier, Ms. Shorenstein, who wanted to provide some public comments that she needed to leave early and was not able to provide. I did email those to Monica and to Deputy Director Watts. Is there a way that her comments can be provided at this time?
That will be for agenda items, not on the agenda. Public comment.
Thank you. And did you receive those?
Yes, I did.
Thank you so much.
All right. Kevin, do we have any email public comment?
No email public comment.
All right, then we'll move on to agenda item Roman numeral 7. And I just wanted to take a few minutes of remembrance of Pope Francis. California has the largest Catholic population in the United States. And about 30% of our state are people who belong to the Catholic faith. I've been involved with interfaith for decades, and indeed the first fora that we had was co-sponsored by the Diocese of San Bernardino and Catholic Charities. But there was one particular person that I wanted to reference today, and that's my dear friend Trenna Mines, who, despite losing her husband in the San Bernardino terror attack, never had her faith yield, nor did she ever do anything but promote interreligious dialogue to the children who she's a principal for in the diocese back in the Inland Empire. And I just wanted to give you a shout out because meeting you has been such an inspiration to me, and your devotion to your faith and to peace among all people is something that I think is exactly the kind of message that we need in a world that we're in today. Indeed, among the last things that Pope Francis said was, "May the light of peace radiate through the Holy Land and the entire world." And he talked about his closeness on Easter to the suffering of Christians in Palestine and Israel, and indeed to all the Israeli people and Palestinian people. He spoke out against anti-Semitism. He spoke for humanitarianism in our world affairs. And I just think, in closing with this, on Good Friday, and I'm not here to promote prayer, but I am here to promote human dignity and what his message says to indeed all people, whether they be people of faith or not. And he said, "When we are strong and we are not, teach us to love. When we are bound by unjust laws or decisions, teach us to love. When we are at odds with those uninterested in truth and justice, teach us to love. When we are tempted to despair, teach us to love. When everyone says there is nothing to be done, teach us to love." And on that, I want to close with the remembrance and offer my good tidings to all people who care about peace in the world, and to my Catholic friends and to my non-Catholic friends who have a deep affection for what Pope Francis was trying to do. Thank you so much. Is there a commission discussion on this? All right. Is there public comment? Monica, do we have any comment on Zoom or in the room in our state's capital? All right. Then without further ado, let's move on to the next item on the agenda item number 8, discussion of civil rights and civil liberties. As I stated in my chair's statement, am critically concerned with a variety of things that are being done with respect to the enforcement of civil rights laws in this country based on things that we're seeing out of Washington, whether it's executive orders or a challenge with respect to disparate impact, which has been used as a barometer for many years, as well as attacks against many institutions that I've had something to deal with, whether it's universities, law firms, agencies that enforce civil rights, and others. I'm extraordinarily concerned. In addition, I am very concerned about the implementation of 2 federal laws. One, the Alien Enemies Act, which dates to the 1790s, and its companion acts were held in high contempt, and pardons were made for people who were convicted under those acts, where we saw newspaper editors jailed, where we saw political dissenters jailed. Yet in that same package of legislation, we are now using that to deport people incorrectly, as the federal judge in the district in Texas pointed out, Judge Rodriguez pointed out. There's no war. There is no invasion in the way that anything is coming from a government. So that's one thing. The other thing that I do believe warrants mention is an Immigration Act from the 1950s, which includes a section that says people can be deported in a very vague way if their actions run counter to American foreign policy. This has been used to deport people who have not been found to have connections to designated terror groups or have any connection to criminality. This cannot stand. As I told the Los Angeles Times in early March, this is an affront to our constitutional protections. So far, 60 colleges have been informed that they're under investigation, including 4 UCs and various other schools here in California. And again, I mentioned the case of Ms. Ozturk, a doctoral student who the Washington Post appears to have found her only activity that seems to have been tagged by the government was an op-ed in the Tufts Daily newspaper. Jewish college professors, Jewish college presidents, Erwin Chemerinsky, the dean of a UC law school, stated his contempt for what is being done to our First Amendment protections. I join them all. I am not speaking as any leader in any faith community, but as someone who has written U.S. Supreme Court briefs and who was mentored by a renowned African-American federal judge. We must, if there is any fixed star, as the Supreme Court has said, in our constitutional universe, it is that the government cannot prescribe an orthodoxy of acceptable ideas, and twisting and turning or abusing older legislation to achieve that end is an abrogation of the duties and obligation that these government officials have for the protection of our neighbors. And if the federal government believes that they can, under the name of fighting anti-Semitism, then why are they eliminating grant programs to protect houses of worship? Why are they eliminating research that affects these communities? The answer is because they're only opposed to this kind of activity when it serves some other political end. And I will not allow that to occur in my state without standing up to it. We will have a civil rights and civil liberties agenda item for all of you to respond to going forward, based on the input that I've gotten from the outreach that I've made to various communities. I want to thank you for the ability to discuss this today and to please ask those who have authority to protect others who have opinions that may run counter to yours or mine or someone else's, but who express them in ways that do not violate the law. It is a cornerstone of our constitutional system, and it has been memorialized in Supreme Court case after Supreme Court case. Thank you for the opportunity to make this statement on behalf of neighbors of mine who may not be able to make that case themselves because they're being disappeared. And no civilized society, especially one with a constitution such as ours, can tolerate such misconduct. Thank you. If there are any comments from commissioners, I respectfully would like to hear that now.
No comment. Vice Chair Adamski.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for those comments. This is exactly the kind of statements that I would hope to hear from our commission at this time, particularly our commission chair, our leader. And I agree with everything that you said. So other than thank you, and also thank you for your comments about Pope Francis. My heart is full. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Salcedo.
I am a little, confused about the whole thing. Thank you so much for everything that you said. And I know that the intention is all there, but the reality is that, the times that we're living and everything that is going on, I wonder oftentimes, what kind of power we have in order to change what is happening. And I know that we are doing the best that we can, but we have systems in place that have this, have been designed to, to portray hate against people, to criminalize people for who we are, for, to essentially and ultimately kill people. And so, I definitely agree with you, Chair Levin, right? That yes, we are supposed to be in this country that has this constitution and all of this and that, but in practice is different, right? There's no equity, there's no equality, there's, there's so many different things that happen that in theory are great, but in practice are not. And so, there's a extreme level of hypocrisy that we experience in our society that, I don't know. I am, extremely disappointed about, the times that we're living and everything. And so, I know that we exist as a commission to, with the hopes that we eliminate hate. But I also wonder oftentimes what kind of power we have and, or what kind of power can back up the work that we want to do, It's so many different intricacies, working with law enforcement who is also, brutal and, and just, I don't know. Anyways. Yeah, I think again, in theory it sounds great, but in practice it's very different.
Thank you. And unfortunately, you are right. We are not living up to our aspirations when we see dozens of transgender people murdered every year. And now a withdrawal or seeming withdrawal of protections from the very federal institutions that are supposed to make sure that this is a truth as opposed to an aspiration. And the only thing I can say, Commissioner Salcedo, is that you have an ally for life in me, and I don't generally like to speak on behalf of the rest of the commissioners, but I can tell you have touched us all. And we're just going to keep doing it. You are not alone, and it's important for everyone to stand up for people's personal liberty, which includes the right to be who they are. And if we don't do that, we're not the America of our aspirations. But it's so important for us to stand together with you. And I wholeheartedly do. And I thank you. And I thank you for the work that you've done over the course of your life to help so many people. You're a blessing to us. Any other comments from commissioners?
No additional commissioner comment.
Okay, do we have any comments from Zoom or the room, Monica?
No public comment from Zoom or the room.
All right. Kevin, do we have any email public comment?
No public comment on email.
All right, thank you. Then I believe we can move on to agenda number 9, discussion of outreach and publicity. I just wanted to thank Rishi, our wonderful public affairs person who also wears the hat of the public affairs person for CRD, who was great in working to get a press release out for this. It is my hope that when we have substantive things going on in our meetings, like we had today with this just phenomenal Civil Rights Department presentation and an excellent one by Dr. Dunbar. Some things that I think we might want to consider is having a standalone link perhaps that gets us to our page, and maybe we could jazz the page up like the Commission on the Status of Women. But I really want to hear your suggestions as well as what we can do to get the word out, because the type of work and research that is being done is world-class, and I'd like to continue to get that out. So I'm going to now demur to my fellow commissioners, if anyone has a comment or suggestion.
No commissioner comment.
Fantastic. Do we have any comments from public comments on Zoom or in the room, Monica?
No public comment on Zoom or the room.
All right. Kevin, do we have any email public comment?
No email public comment.
All right, then we'll go to commission member announcements.
Are we reading the statement from, I'm sorry.
I thought that was coming later.
Okay, my bad.
Sorry. Commissioner Che, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair Levin, for this opportunity. Monica, would you mind dropping in the link to a new report by Stop API Hate? Just wanted to share that just this past month, we released a report entitled Bracing for Impact: How Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders Confront Trump's Return. Just by way of reminder, we launched Stop API Hate under the first Trump administration when he essentially put a target on Asian Americans, referring to COVID as the China and Kung flu virus. While nothing new, this certainly, we experienced increased incidents of hate. And this report comes out of a nationally representative survey, a survey that we're doing every year to establish a baseline on the state of API hate. And while this is nationally representative, we are working a California-specific report that pretty much matches the opinions of those who were polled. And I think the upshot, and give you an opportunity to review the report in more detail, is that our community is bracing for rising discrimination, hate, and economic hardship. And a majority actually are opposed to the extreme anti-immigrant, anti-DEI agenda, and believe that these policies combined, which not only just affect AAPIs, are putting our lives and livelihoods at risk. So I wanted to just share that with you all, and thank you, Monica, for sharing the link.
And thank you for doing groundbreaking work. And let me just say something real quick. One of the things that I did way back in 2016 was to back test the very type of research collection that Stop AAPI Hate originally did. And you know what it showed? It showed down to the day the trends matched. Down to the day when we compared, now little apples and oranges, FBI criminal events, but what I'm saying to you is this complements so much, and the work that we found, and I'm sorry, the important insights that we found, they continue to come out of your organization. And one of the things that I found so incredible was looking at the percentage of respondents that said basically they're girding for an increase in hate and in the hateful rhetoric as well. And unfortunately, one of the things that we've seen is when we had last decade, President Trump talk about a trade war with China, that month was one of the 2 worst months of that decade prior to the pandemic for anti-Asian hate. So we're so lucky to have you, and the state is so lucky to have you, and thank you. Bring this to our attention, and it's as folks know, it's going to be rightly so in our report. Commissioner so thank you so much, Commissioner Che. Commissioner Salcedo, you have a hand up. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I wanna just invite everyone, all my fellow commissioners and the people at large to the Walk for Humanity, which is an event that we are organizing to bring together all people from all movements to stand in solidarity with one another while supporting fundraising for the Trans-Latina Coalition. As you may know, the Trans-Latina Coalition, along with other nonprofit organizations, will be losing program funding from the federal government. And obviously, you know, this will impact not just members of our staff, but also people who depend on services that we provide. So the Walk for Humanity will take place on Sunday, August 24th. And essentially what we're doing is that we're asking 1,000 people to help us raise $1,000 each. And that will help us supplement the funding that we are going to be losing. So I want to obviously invite each of you to perhaps, you know, either create a team or, you know, create your own fundraising team and be part of it. It will take place in Los Angeles. Yeah, but also, you know, please let your friends, your colleagues know. And it'll be a beautiful and amazing event. It's going to be a historic event here in Los Angeles, and we want, you know, to invite you to be part of it. So thank you so much for the opportunity to announce this historic and amazing event for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. And just before, don't go anywhere. August 25th,
Sunday, August 24th.
Sunday, August 24th. And please, folks, if you can look in the chat section, there's a website, https:// those two dots, / walk the digit 4 humanity.org. So walk for humanity.org. Commissioner Alstede, would you mind if I personally tweeted this on my social media so that people can be aware?
Please, we share wide and far. So yeah, we want for as many people as possible to participate. Again, this is something that we are doing to invite all people from all movements to stand in solidarity with one another, while at the same time supporting fundraising for our organization. So yes, please share it.
Thank you. And I see Commissioner Che has her hand up. I hope I didn't cut you off. If so, I apologize.
No, my apologies. I forgot to lower it. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other commissioner announcements?
No additional commissioner hands raised.
Okay. Monica, do we have public comment on Zoom or in the room in Sacramento?
No public comment. We have one public comment. Jeff?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'm going to start my timer to be timely here. Hello, Chair Levin and board. Thank you for the excellent work you're presenting. My name is Jeff Ellsworth. I was mayor of the small town of St. Helena, Napa County, California from 2018 to 2022 when I became aware of a situation at Upper Valley Disposal Service Clover Flat landfill of dozens of Latino garbage workers impacted by long-term exposure to toxic wastewater and toxic fires, as well as Latino employees exposed to unregulated radioactive material and employee death due to substandard infrastructure and other discriminatory and coercive workplace practices toward this Latino workforce abused into subhuman working conditions, including servitude-type conditions with a company operating under exclusive government contracts. I recognize the focus of this commission is on hate crimes. What we are seeing here is systemic, unlawful, criminal-type behavior focused on a primarily Latino workforce, intimidated into silence by this garbage company, putting not only the Latino workforce, but the entire Napa Valley community at risk from wildfires and contamination incidents. I continue to advocate without success to public agencies for public meetings with sworn testimony on this issue. I spoke on these issues last weekend at the California LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens statewide convention in Los Angeles, with a resolution that LULAC put out last year on this, as well as a new coalition letter that I'm including in this my submission. The situation is also being addressed with a $100 million to $500 million federal level lawsuit and documentary film called Garbage and Greed, Trashed in the Napa Valley, that you can find online. To relate back to hate crimes, this is a situation of systemically unlawful mistreatment of Latino workers falling through the cracks in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I'd like to ask for this matter to be agendized with this commission with public hearings and sworn testimony. My contact information will be available on my submission. I really appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a point of agenda. This when we're looking for public comment now, would just be with respect to the commission statements, but we'll put this in as an agenda item that I'm sorry, an item not on the agenda. So
my apologies. I was looking at the agenda and I guess I became confused here. So I not to want to repeat myself. So if you'll put it in the right place, I would appreciate it. And I'll submit my comments by email as well.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any public comments on the commissioner statements?
No comment.
Okay. And Kevin, just want to check, we don't have any emails yet?
No emails on commissioner statements, no.
Great, thank you. We'll move quickly to the next agenda item, which is future agenda items. Is there commission discussion on things that you would like on future agendas?
No commissioner comment.
All right. Monica, do we have public comment on Zoom or in the room in Sacramento?
Yeah, Greg DeGier.
Greg, please.
Is this the time, right time? I'll
For
take it.
future agenda items?
I'll take it that it is. I feel so much like Commissioner Salcedo, frustrated, angry. If I sound angry sometimes when I'm speaking to you, it's because I am. I'm angry about what's happening to our country, and the relatively small slice of it that I feel like I could have something to actually work on that will help some, perhaps, has to do with hate crimes and crimes against people with disabilities and seniors. And my message to all of you is, you are members of the State Commission on the Status of Hate. If you recommend some specific action to the legislature, they will pay attention. I don't know whether they will pass it, but they will get their attention. The civil rights groups, several of them have been working for the last 5 months to try to get a bill introduced, somewhat along the lines of what Dr. Bell talked about last month. We got nowhere. And I predict we'll get nowhere again next year unless the Commission on the Status of Hate picks it up and makes a specific recommendation to the legislature and the governor on what to do about responses, preventing and particularly responding to and investigating hate crimes and potential hate crimes. I had a chance to talk to her later after the meeting last month, and she assured me that all the major law enforcement agencies that really take hate crime seriously are doing exactly that, are focusing on getting their officers to take seriously hate crime reports and investigate them and respond. So I'm calling on the commission to put 2 things on the agenda for next month. One is a follow-up to
30 seconds.
Bell.
Sorry, Greg, just 30 seconds. I'm sorry.
One is a follow-up to her comments last month, and 2 is the follow-up to the commission hearing on disability, the disability community. Those are 2 items that the possible action is cooked enough that it's ready to be put together and given to the legislature this year. Don't wait for the annual report. That the legislature might actually take some action on that would actually make a difference. And I'm sure there are some other items that I'm missing that others can point out that might be applicable to too. So I'm asking that those items be on the agenda for next month.
Thank you. And just before I let you go, though, because we have time, when I say we have time, time's up. But what was the first item? I didn't quite hear it. So if you could just repeat what you said the first item was.
Police response to hate crimes, particularly concerning investigating and following up. What Dr. Bell talked about.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Do we have any other public comment, either in the room or on Zoom?
No further public comment in the room or on Zoom.
Okay. Do we have any public comment by email?
No public comment on future agenda items by email.
All right. I want to move to the next agenda item, which is a special adjournment. Today, we're going to adjourn in the memory of Linda Becerra Moran with some words from Commissioner Salcedo. Before she speaks, though, I want to make sure that people know that in the state of California, we protect under the law our transgender brothers and sisters. And I want to now extend my gratitude, but also my condolences to Commissioner Salcedo and our state's transgender community. Commissioner Salcedo, please, the floor is yours for this adjournment in honor of Ms. Moran.
Thank you so much. Well, this is an adjournment to our meeting, and thank you so much for the opportunity. There's so much to say, specifically about the murder of Linda Becerra Moran, who was brutally murdered by Los Angeles Police Department, in which, in my opinion, was an act of hate. And an act of hate that was generated by perhaps the way we think about trans women specifically, perhaps the way the officer thought of the life of Linda Becerra Moran, when, in my opinion, there was no need to end her life. To be someone who is law enforcement, who has apparently, or supposedly have received training on how to de-escalate, on how to not necessarily use force if force is not necessarily needed. But for this individual to brutally kill Linda Becerra Moran was, in my opinion, an act of hate. This person could have used other means to perhaps calm the situation, but this person decided to use a single shot to the heart that ended Linda Becerra Moran. And so this is the reality of our community. I also wanna, I wanna lift the name of Linda Becerra Moran into, with my hope that she rests in power and understands that that she was loved and she was appreciated and cared for. And that message is for all of our community members. At the same time, I also want to bring the case of Sabrina de la Peña, who has been attacked multiple times here by MacArthur Park, just a few blocks from where our center is at in Koreatown. And obviously MacArthur Park is on, it's a Westlake, which is again a couple of blocks from here. But again, these acts of hate, right? Like what specifically happened to Sabrina was an individual threw acid in one of the attempts, to her, in one of the attempts to do harm to her, an attempt of hate. And to what I understand, in Sabrina's own words, is that when the first incident happened on April 8th, when she went to LAPD at the Rampart station, that she was told to fill up the form online. although there was no way to, no evidence to do anything about the incident. And then the incidents continued to happen. Right? And so to the point to where Sabrina was empowered and encouraged enough to call the media to bring attention to the issue because our law enforcement was not able to support her. So she continues to be scared for her life, just as, you know, Linda was scared for her life when she made the initial call to LAPD. And so these are the realities that we continue to experience. And so I want to adjourn this meeting on the name of not just our siblings who have been perished to the hate that we continue to experience, but also to lead our siblings, all of those who are members of the trans, gender expansive, and intersex communities to understand that we will prevail. Hate will not win. On the other hand, our existence will continue to be a resistance for us to be integrated into the tapestry of our society. Thank you again so much for the opportunity, Chair Levin.
Thank you. And just powerful words. And I think it is so important that we stand by as allies. So thank you so much, Commissioner Salcedo, for your remarks. And I hope that the transgender community knows that there are people that care about the dignity of all people. And that's what I hope we aspire to do. Before we do adjourn in her honor and indeed in honor of the whole transgender community here in California and throughout the country, I understand that we had an emailed public comment item for item number 12, public comment on items not on the agenda. So if we can have that read, I will then after that go to adjournment in Ms. Moran's honor, if that is okay with everyone. Okay, can we have?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Dr. Thomas, please.
Yes, this is the comment that was sent to Vice Chair Damsky. It's from Rosalind Shorenstein. She states that Jewish residents faced a second occurrence of harassment and anti-Semitism at the April 16th, 2025 Pajaro Valley Unified School District meeting by 2 school board trustees. Rosalind Shorenstein believes that the civil rights of Jewish residents were violated by these officials and encourages the Commission on the State of Hate to investigate this matter further.
Thank you. With that noted.
What school? I'm sorry, where was this?
Pajaro Valley Unified School District.
I believe that was over a presentation on ethnic studies, if I remember correctly. Do we have any commissioner statements connected to that? Okay, do we have any other public comment on items not on the agenda? From Monica on Zoom or in the room, or Dr. Thomas, wherever you're at?
No public comment on Zoom or in the room.
All right, thank you.
I would just say that we did receive the previous comment from Jeff Ellsworth by email, but since he already told us about it, I won't go ahead and repeat it here.
Sure. Thank you again. It is 5:10 and I want to adjourn in honor of Linda Becerra Moran. And I also want to say that we have to look out for each other. Whether someone's homeless or transgender or experiencing emotional distress. Everyone deserves to live and to live with dignity in our state. And I want to thank the Civil Rights Department and all my fellow commissioners heartfelt for the wonderful work that you do on behalf of our state and our residents, no matter what their station is in life or no matter what their characteristics are. So on that note, if I could have a motion to adjourn in honor of Linda Becerra Moran.
I'll move.
Thank you so
Second
much.
that.
Thank you, Vice Chair Damsky. We adjourn at 5:11. Thank you.